Everyone, welcome to this special masterclass presentation for the LINOLEUM Contemporary Animation and Media Art Festival. I'm Ben Mitchell from Skwigly Animation Magazine, and we've been really privileged to be involved with some of the events happening for this year's edition, especially as the main themes of mental well-being are very important to me, and I'm sure all of us. It's been a really enlightening experience doing the various filmmaker Q&As and getting perspectives of the relationship between animation and mental health. And I'm very excited to be speaking on this with one of my personal heroes today, the incredible Joanna Quinn, who's been an inspirational figurehead to many, not just in her home city of Cardiff, but to the international animation industry as a whole, as this event is testament to. On a personal note, she's also been one of the biggest supporters of the magazine since day one, which has meant a great deal to us. And if you've seen her films, obviously you have, you know she is a brilliant, brilliant animator and storyteller.
I think Ben has been experiencing power cuts. So I think this is what is happening in Britain at the moment. I think he's probably had a power cut. So I might pretend to be Ben as well until he comes back. So I think what we were going to do is just talk about not just the highs of being an animator, but also the lows. And so I've actually got a list of all of the things that we knew we were going to discuss today. So luckily I've got the questions here. So first of all, yeah, I'm Joanna Quinn, obviously, and I went to Middlesex Polytechnic to study graphic design years ago in the 1980s. And it was there that I discovered animation, and it was just wonderful. It was one of those moments, and just changed my life, being able to see drawings move for the first time. And I knew at that point that I wanted to do animation forever, literally. And so, you know, college was great, you know, and I think because there were just a few of us doing animation, there was only me in my graphic design course, and then there was a couple of other people on another course doing animation. So there was no real competition. And so there was no feelings about thinking I'm no good or they're better than me or anything. It was all just exploring and enjoying finding out about animation, because I wasn't on an animation course, so I had to sort of find it out. And so there was no sort of pressures or anything at college in that way. So that was one of Ben's questions, you know, just talking about the pressures of college. And then and I finished my graduation film, Girls' Night Out, and unlike, because I do a lot of teaching now, unlike, you know, graduates today, it's incredibly competitive now. You know, there are so many animation courses all over the world, all competing, all these lovely graduates all competing for people to see their films. And of course, when I left college, it wasn't like that at all. And I had made this film, and I wasn't really worried about getting work, because there seemed to be quite a lot of work around. And so I knew I could get work doing illustration. So when I left college, I just did work doing illustration, because I didn't really know about this world of animation. So I sort of fell into everything, you know, it was very different. And people said, what about your graduation film? Why don't you enter it to film festivals? And so I thought, okay. So, and here is Ben.
Hello.
I've been pretending to be you, Ben.
Very sorry.
I got as far as me talking about leaving college with my film Girls' Night Out and entering it for film festivals. Excellent. But that's as far as I got.
Well, hopefully I won't be knocked out again, although we have been having power cuts here. They just started about 2 minutes before the event. So fingers crossed they've knocked it off for now. But thank you for taking the lead on that. Yeah. Just in case it didn't come up, there is going to be time at the end for audience questions. So if people have questions for you, for Joanna, then by all means, please do leave them in the Q&A box, and we'll get to those at the end of our chat. If I'm still here by then. But anyway, yes, so thank you. Continue.
Oh, right. Okay. So, yes, one of the things we were discussing, Ben, was about how different it was when I left college to what it's like now, and entering this world of animation that I knew nothing about, and so I sent my film to Annecy, and not really knowing anything about the festival. It just so happened that it turned out to be, Annecy and huge and well known. And so it was great that I chose to show it in that festival. And as we talked about, it won 3 prizes, which was a total shock because I wasn't expecting it at all. Because I've been living in my little graphic design bubble, I didn't know where I fitted in, to the animation world. So to win 3 prizes was a real surprise, and I think I realized when I was there and I was looking at all of these other animated films that there weren't. My film was about, it was Girls' Night Out, and it was about women going to see a male stripper, and which was quite new in the 80s, and so I had sort of turned the voyeur on its head, and the women were doing the voyeurism and not the men. And when I was in Annecy and seeing a lot of the films, I did realize that there were very few films with really strong women characters. And although there were a wonderful array of films, I did think, there's a lot of sexism here. So I did see how my film was different at that point. But you know what it's like when you're doing something, you can't see where you are, because you just do what you do. But that was the first time I was able to compare myself with other people and think, okay, right. Now I have a responsibility to make films with strong female characters, because it's needed, That's what I came away thinking.
When you say sexism, was that as regards the way characters were depicted in films, or was it attitudes actually sort of to women directors?
Oh, no, not towards women directors. No, it was just towards it was in the films. There were so many films where women were, half naked, or mind you, women are always half naked in my films, but in a different way, and being laughed at, but a lot of women were being laughed at, and the protagonists were mainly male, and the women were, figures of fantasy or, battle axes or something, but they were in relation to the men. So and I had a wonderful time, and people treated me wonderfully, and it was just a ball. I did have one strange encounter when we were getting on a coach to go somewhere, and an unknown, I didn't know who he was, he turned to me, and he didn't like my film, and he said, "Why do you hate men so much?" And that was a real shock, and I said, "I don't hate men." And then he didn't say anything else, and he walked off. And so it did get me thinking about, because when you make a film, or when I made a film, you're in a little bubble and you're quietly on your own. But as soon as you finish your film and it's out there, it becomes public property, and people can think and say whatever they want about your film. And some, and sometimes that's quite shocking because you hadn't thought about it in that way, and you think, oh, crumbs, okay.
And so 3 Annecy prizes out of the gate, and like 1 Annecy prize is, it's a white whale for a lot of people throughout their careers. It takes, some people never quite even get there. whether it be Annecy or any other sort of major festival. So to get your very first film, have it so accoladed and so kind of like acclaimed out of the gate, obviously it's amazing. It's a very positive thing to happen. But I imagine it probably comes with a bunch of pressures and possibly, I don't know, sort of affects how you look at where you go from that point.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it was such a shock. I didn't know. I didn't really know that it was that hard to win a prize. At that point, I thought, well, maybe everybody wins prizes. I mean, it didn't. I wasn't. It was all new to me, and when I had won those prizes, and I was talking to somebody, and they said, "You should enjoy this moment because it's never going to happen again." And I thought, what a funny thing to say. Is it really not going to happen again? And I think that person saying that to me really made me think, I'll prove him wrong. I'll prove him wrong. And of course, I did enjoy. I did enjoy the winning of the prizes, and I did enjoy people liking my film. So instead of being like terrified by it, it was all very positive, and it was a time when there was quite a lot of money around. And so it seemed quite easy to find money and interest to make another film. And it was when we started to make the other film that I started to feel the pressure of professionalism. Oh, he's gone again. Yeah, so I felt that when I made my film Girls' Night Out, I was a student, and so I was experimenting and having fun, and the film was what it was, but it was a student film. And it was all made with college money and friends helping and things like that. Getting money to make a film the first time, getting actual proper money from a television company was completely different. And I did struggle with notions of professionalism, because my film was, The Girls' Night Out, was very loose and very rough. And I did think, I can't do that now because I've been paid, so I have to do it proper. I have to sort of make it look tidier. And so I was thinking at that point that there was all these. I was wrestling with the idea of making a film with somebody else's money and feeling very, very responsible about that. And it's going to be on television. So then you had all of the pressures of all of that, which was pretty scary. And I think the animation, it became much tighter. This was Body Beautiful. I mean, it was fantastic that me and my partner Les, he wrote the script. He got paid to write this new script. I got paid to do the animation, and it was a really big learning curve. But it was great. It was great fun, and we did it. But I did think that the animation had become much tighter. And when we finished the film and had a look at it, and some people said, oh, it's gone a bit tighter. And then I realized that, of course, it was my own anxiety about not being a student anymore and having to be professional. And so I think that's the thing that students can remember, think about when they leave college, is that when people give you money or want you to do a job, they want that energy that you've got when you're a student. They don't want this. They don't want you to be a professional and tick all those boxes. They want that energy and that dynamism that students have when they're experimenting and having fun. So that's something that I have learned. Anyway, I'll go down because I'm being Ben now. Okay, so the positives and negatives. Okay, imposter syndrome. Is this something you've experienced personally or did in the early years of your career? Imposter syndrome. I think we all feel imposter syndrome. I can't think of anybody who doesn't feel that they why am I here? Maybe somebody's made a mistake, However, I have. Oh, Ben, you're back. Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
I'm very sorry too. Couldn't imagine worse timing. But
So the last power cut was 10 years ago in Bristol, and so now you've had 3 in the last
20
15
minutes.
I was just talking about imposter syndrome, actually.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, yeah. Because that's, I think, a term that kind of is probably more recent, or sort of more recently kind of entered common usage. So did it feel like that was sort of discussed, I guess, back then?
It wasn't really discussed, actually. I don't remember people saying imposter syndrome. You just felt it. This feeling of, should I really be here? Am I going to be found out? But I do think we all suffer from that. However, I do feel that my mum, really did give me an awful lot of confidence, and I do think that I've had this healthy disrespect for authority from a very young age, and I think that helps. You just sort of battle through, and my mum was ever an optimist, and so I've inherited her optimism, and I think that helps enormously, rather than thinking everything's going to go wrong and why am I here and oh my God. I do think everything's going to be fine. I do have that. Sometimes it isn't fine, and that's a big shock. But I think my natural optimism has really helped me go through and take risks as well, and not worry too much about things not going wrong, which I know does prevent a lot of people from taking risks because they're scared of failure. So
And you're so well known for your personal work and the films that you've done. You've also taken on a lot of bread and butter work and sort of long-term contracts with agencies and other companies and clients and stuff like that. And I imagine both kind of have their own sets of, I guess, hurdles to overcome.
yeah, definitely. I mean, making films, especially the films that Les and I make, they're very much our own films, and so we're normally left alone, and we can get on with them, and it's fine. And so there's less of a feeling that somebody's staring over your shoulder. However, with the commercials, it was very, very different, because we always, I mean, you just have to be there 100% of the time, and whoops, Ben's gone again. Yeah, you just have to be there 100% of the time, and you have to be utterly committed to the agency and the commercials. And so I suppose I found it quite difficult because when we were doing our first commercials, we had our daughter, and so I became a mother. And I think I took a little bit of time off, but not much. I had to go straight back into it. And that was really hard because I just wanted to be with my lovely baby, and I couldn't because I had to do the work. And so that was really hard because I couldn't talk too much about family and, oh, I need to go because, I want to be with my family. You have to be there 110% of the time. So that was a real dilemma. And actually, Ben and I were laughing. It wasn't that funny, but when Paloma, our daughter, was born, we were actually in the middle of doing a commercial. And so I had to take her to the post-production because we managed to finish it. And when we took her to the post-production, and I went with my animator friend, Jane Hubbard, who was really helping on the last leg of the commercial. And we went there, and Paloma was literally, she was about that big, you know, tiny, teeny tiny. And I had to take her there because I was feeding her and everything. And I was just thinking, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And it was just, I was all, you know, it was just a really funny time. And on the way back, we finished the commercial, and on the way back, we were on the train, and we were both absolutely exhausted. And I was holding Paloma, and we both fell asleep. And then I was woken up by the man who was sitting opposite us, and he nudged me, and he had Paloma in his hands, and he handed her to me, saying, "I think this is yours." And of course, I had fallen asleep, and she'd rollen off onto the floor. Isn't that terrible? Because I've just forgotten I had a baby, you know, because it was like we were in the middle of these commercials. So that was a real struggle. That was a real struggle, having to deal with being a new mother and doing commercials. And then we did Famous Fred, which of course was a half-hour film. And luckily, you know, Les looked after Paloma really for the first year of her life, you know, because I was working on that film. So juggling being a parent and making films and commercials was pretty hard. And I did have a conversation with Paloma recently, because she's now a big grown up and didn't follow the path of doing animation. She decided she wanted to be a vet, so she looks after animals, except she's now going out with an animator, can you believe? So she's doing animation. I can't believe it. Anyway, a vet, an animator vet she is. But I did have a conversation with her about those early years, you know, and I said I did feel a bit like an absent mum. Ben, you're back. I was just talking about the trials and tribulations of being a mother at the same time as juggling work, and I was just saying that I spoke to Paloma as an adult, you know, and I said I feel terrible guilt, you know, about those early years and not being there for, you know, I missed so many sports days, and I really I'm so competitive and I love sports, that, you know, personally I miss those sports days. But, you know, and I said to her, I'm really sorry I wasn't there and everything. And do you feel that I was absent? And she said, no, not at all. Not really, you know. And she said, well, okay, you never baked any cakes. But she said, you are a role model, you know, as a mum, you're a great role model. And it's given her the strength to do what she wants to do and stuff. So, okay, I might have not been there baking cakes, but I was a good role model, she said. So that's it. Off the hook.
I think it says quite a lot that your impulse, you know, when she was an adult and with some reflection and some introspection, was to actually ask those questions. Because I think, you know, for quite a lot of people, it can be very easy to kind of get like really zoned in on their career, or, you know, lose sense of priorities. And I think that because you always have had that sort of awareness of it, I think that is probably something that sort of shone through, like in intent, you know, you wanted to do that.
Well, I think my mother always said to me, you know, go for it. As long as you're happy, that's all that matters. And I think that's the sort of thing that I like to pass on to Paloma and say, as long as you're happy and doing what you want, then do it, go for it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, in general, what's her attitude toward the films that you and Les make?
Oh, well, she's worked on most of them. She was doing colouring in, and from a very young age, and compositing. She did compositing. Her and her friends did mats, cheap child labour. Actually, she wasn't. No, she was. Very proud, but the worst critic. She's terrible. We once did this when we were working on Family Ties. I was working with other animators, and I worked with Andy McPherson, a fantastic animator, and he did this animated sequence, And when I got it back from him, I showed it to Paloma and I said, "Isn't this the most beautiful animation?" She went, "Oh, it's fantastic." And I said, "I know." So then I took it and I Quinified it. So, you know, I went through it and put it on model so it looked like I had done it. And then I showed it to Paloma and I said, "Look at this. What do you think?" She went, "You've ruined it." I thought, oh. Thanks, Paloma. So, yeah, our worst critic, but it's also very good having a little critic around to ask, to tell you the truth.
I guess that's the other thing also with more visibility that comes with successful films that kind of sell and really do the rounds. Inevitably, you're going to get more, I guess, audience feedback. And maybe some of it, like you mentioned, you know, the chap at Annecy sort of right at the beginning. Was there ever other sort of stuff like that? And
yes, there was. It was Girls' Night Out again. It was chosen for a animation tournée, which went on tour in America, and we actually went over, and Nick Park was part of it, and who else was part of it? I can't remember, but there was a number of It was called the British Invasion or something like that, and we all went to America and we went to New York and LA. It was fantastic on this tour. And as we went around to the cinemas, you know, newspapers were writing about the films. And I'll never forget that Charles Solomon, I haven't forgotten his name either, in LA wrote, he wrote all about the films and then absolutely slagged my film off. And I was so shocked, you know, because he said it was messy, it was scribbly, and it was like, and then my initial thought was, he was comparing it because there was another film in it. He was comparing it to Disney, you know, and I was thinking, how can you compare my film to a Disney film or to any film with an enormous budget? And then I realized, of course you can, and that's what they do. That's what happens. You know, you make a film, nobody knows how much it costs. Nobody knows if you're a student or you weren't a student. Nobody knows the background of the film. It's just a film, and it's there to be compared with any other film that's gone before or is your contemporary. You know, it just gets compared. And so that was a big learning lesson as well. Yeah.
But at the same time, like to look at that film and you come up with like Skwigly, get in the bin, mate. I guess I should clarify we're talking, you know, about these sort of things that are less talked about, not as positive as we tend to sort of talk about in interviews. The intention isn't to kind of dwell on the negative. From my perspective, in case anyone's like, why did you just ask all these horrible questions? But more about, like, you know, what you just sort of said is you come out of these and you guess sort of piece together sort of how the whole industry works. And I guess over time it maybe gets easier to not take it quite so personally.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the important thing is just that, you know, there are wonderful highs and then there are lows as well. You know, it's all up and down. Everything always is. And so you're right. You know, when I do these talks normally, we're only ever talking about the positive things, you know, and it's all, but you know, we're all human, and so we've all got our own problems and have to deal with day-to-day stuff, and so that's sort of what we're talking about, isn't it? You know, just how you deal with everything when you're making films.
Absolutely. And then I guess sort of circling back to like the commercial work as well. I imagine that also sort of comes packaged with its own sort of stresses, especially if you're, say, trying to do personal projects at the same time. I think you mentioned that there were points where they actually did sort of overlap a bit. And I'd be sort of interested.
I think doing commercials is fantastic. You know, I really enjoyed doing commercials because there are certain things that it's so completely different to working on a film. It's short. it's intense, and you can work with a team, and there's a certain energy to it, which is quite nice. And it also means, you know, you've got proper budgets and you can bring people on. We did a lot of work experience. So we brought in a lot of students from colleges, a lot of kids from schools as well, refusing to take their coats off in the corner, you know. And so it enabled us to do that, which was great, and train people up, and you know, employ a lot of people. You know, when we were really busy, you know, we had about 40 people we were employing, and so that felt great. But of course, the more people you employ, the more distant you become from the artwork, and because you become more of a manager and a director. So I was literally directing, which I love, but it's completely different to doing the animation yourself and actually creating the artwork and getting, because I'm such an animator. I love animation, you know, I love drawing, I love the actual act of animating and the excitement of seeing it move. Directing is very different because you're trying to encourage all of that out of other people. So you're using a lot of different skills. So it's you become a bit of a social worker as well, you know, because you're trying to, everybody's got very precious egos, you know, and as artists, terrible. So you're trying to encourage the best out of people. And so you're trying to, when you see you've asked somebody to do something and then they show you their animation and it's great, but it isn't great, but there's something not quite right and you're trying to work out what it is, but you can't work it out. It's really hard to be on the spot, you know, and to analyze somebody's animation and then put into words what they need to do next. And then you do that, and so they go, okay, so they go and change it, and then it's still not right. And sometimes it's just getting worse. And you can see that they've lost their confidence and it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And then you say, I tell you what, let's go back to the first pass that you did. And they go, I've got rid of it. You know, and they go, ah. So it's dealing with people, you know, and their confidence, because you can't push somebody too much, you know, before they start to lose confidence in themselves. So yeah, so I enjoy that, and I suppose my optimism helps because I think we're going to crack it sooner or later. It's going to be lovely, you know. And so I find it very hard to say it'll do. I'm always so I have been accused of pushing people quite hard, I must admit, but
it's interesting because I know people who have worked for you, and I know you, and I know that, you know, your manner, you're very approachable and nice, and I think probably to a lot of people would find you very agreeable to work with and not, you know, a tyrant by any stretch of the imagination. Is it tricky kind of like going, I guess, into sort of a more assertive boss mode, maybe, if there are things like deadlines looming or I guess sort of issues that really are kind of like, it's very important, okay, right now I'm Joanna Quinn, the boss in this situation?
yeah, it is quite tricky, I have to say. And I think when there's a fine balance with everybody being very friendly and enjoying the work and humorous, and there's a fine line between that and being too relaxed and talking too much and just not working 100%, just working like at 80%. And so it is quite hard sometimes to be to not get angry, you know, and sort of crack the whip. And so dealing with that at times has been quite hard. But I have had help with that, and you know, from people who have shown me pointers of how to deal with that. And because I think the worst thing you can do is well, I'm not that type of person to get that angry. You know, I have got angry, but I don't generally get angry. It doesn't really help anyone. I think the secret as well is to surround yourself with the right team and people who don't panic, you know, in a tricky situation. We've worked with terrific people, and it becomes really important when there's a crisis, you know, when something has gone horribly wrong, because things often go horribly wrong, not horribly wrong, but just go wrong, and you've dropped the ball and you go, ooh, and then you look at your watch and you think, oh my God, how are we going to do this? And the worst thing is to have people who go, ah, and panic and start pointing fingers and it's your fault. And, you know, that absolutely doesn't help. The important thing is like to say, okay, so this is the situation. We've got this amount of time, and it becomes a challenge. You know, it becomes like, how are we going to solve this? And it actually is quite enjoyable to find a way out of that problem. And luckily, we've always worked with people who are great at that. You know, that, I mean, that's a really good producer or line producer, studio manager, somebody who deals well in a crisis, you know, and doesn't get nasty, but you can still carry on laughing and you can still carry on being enjoying it. It just becomes a little tenser. Yeah. But it is a completely different. It is a completely different thing when you're dealing with a big team of people, and it is important to rein everybody in every now and again just to remind them why we're here, you know.
Yeah. But it is also a nice thing to know that, you know, there is a atmosphere of comfort in the work environment. So when it's just sort of reining it in occasionally, because people are kind of that relaxed, I think that's, you know, that's a champagne problem in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, as a keen educator, I do like the challenge of working with somebody who has very little confidence, and they think they can't do something, and I know they can do it, and that's always, I love that. I love working with people and proving them wrong in the best possible way, you know, and getting them to see their work differently and being able to give them confidence and say, try this, try that, do exactly what I say and it'll work, because, and then so they go out of their comfort zone, but as long as they do what I'm telling them, I know it's going to work from experience, and then it does, and that's lovely, you know, because that's like being a teacher again, and it just makes directing really enjoyable.
Yeah.
But sorry.
No, you carry on.
I was going to say what your initial question was like, doing commercials, and actually when films overlap with commercials, it becoming quite tricky, because as I started saying, doing commercials is lovely, but you are at the end of the day a sort of service industry. You know, you're at the end of the food chain. Somebody else has come up with the idea in the agency. They've sold it to the client, who, you know, in a huge, and so they want to sell their product. The agency come up with the idea and try and make it as arty as they possibly can, and interesting as they possibly can, because ultimately the client probably just wants their product on the screen for 30 seconds. They'd be happy with that. So it's the agency's job to come up with an idea that will sell the product that the client is happy with. So you can't really stray that far from the agency's remit. You know, they give you a rough storyboard, you jiggle it around and you suggest things, but you can't change it really that much. So all your creativity goes into making that product as good as you can, you know, making it as yummy as possible, and so that they're super pleased. But you really have to park your own creativity outside the door a little bit, and sometimes you're doing things that maybe you wouldn't choose to do yourself, but you know that they're not going to go with your idea, so you just do the best you can. So because like we were doing commercials for about 15 years, and the way that you know, we could deal with that and keep ourselves from not giving up was by making films at the same time. And of course, that's really hard, because as the director of a commercial, I'm utterly responsible for everything. You know, even though we got a big team, it's me and nobody sees the people in the studio. It's ultimately me. And they almost think it's just me making it. They think I'm animating it. They think I'm coloring it. They think I'm doing everything. And so I'm utterly responsible. So when I'm taken away from that to make a film, so I'm working on my own film and then just checking in to see how the commercials are going, it's like double panic stations, because you haven't got the control of being able to tell people what to do. You just have to accept what the new directors are doing, and they're just reporting to you. But the agencies still think you're doing it. So it's like you've got that, and then you've got your own film, and so it's pretty. And I couldn't really tell, we couldn't tell the agency we were working on that until we had almost finished, and then say, oh, and we've been working on this film. And of course they love it, but they don't want to think that you've been working on 2 productions, and that you're not there 100% of the time. I mean, if they knew and they got to know, the people who were working with us, they totally trusted them, and they knew they were all fantastic people. So, when we built up that strong relationship, it was okay. They had total confidence in all of those people, but at first, not so much, So it's a tricky balance. And having a baby in the middle, it's really stupid. Anyway. Have I utterly shocked you, Ben? Or have you gone again? Okay, next question. I'm Ben again. Yeah. Oh yes, so that was it. Yeah. So there was a big break. We did Dreams and Desires Family. Oh, hang on a minute. I seem to have gone out of focus. There. Hello. When we did Dreams and Desires Family Ties and finished that, there was quite a big gap before our latest film, which is Affairs of the Art. And one of Ben's questions was the pressure of people saying, oh, when is your next film coming along? When are you going to do your next film? And instead of that being supportive, it becomes a real pressure, because the film is years away, and you sort of say, oh, it's nearly there, but actually you think it's never going to be finished. It just is it's miles away. And of course, there was the one thing that people don't really talk about is menopause. And I think after that, after that film, I sort of lost interest in being creative. I wasn't that, I just wasn't that interested. And I found it really hard to get motivated, and it drove Les mad, because he was ready with all his scripts and wanted to do stuff. And I just had a very low period when I just didn't feel creative at all. But I was feeling the pressure of having to make another film, but just couldn't find the energy or the interest to do it. So that was very hard. And then, there were lots of other things happened which sort of prevented us from getting on with the film. I was ill, and we had, my mum died, and there were all these. And I think the point is what Ben was saying, life just sort of gets in the way. Ben, are you real?
I think so. I was really hoping we'd get through the second half.
I was just talking about
I
was just talking about the gap, dealing with the gap between Dreams and Desires and the latest film, Affairs of the Art, and the pressure of people saying, when's your next film coming out? How's it going? And you're going, no.
I'm sorry about that. I think we were asking that for about 6 years. So
I know.
For my part in that,
I know. But anyway. But we finally did.
I mean, with the best of intentions, it is a good point you make. Is that
absolutely? I know. I understand. Yeah, and I was just saying how I just went through a period of not really feeling at all creative, and I said it was probably my menopause and just feeling like a different person, really, and rattling my brain, thinking, why am I not interested? Why can't I draw? Why can't I get interested in anything? So that was, it was a bit of a pickly time.
I suppose in general, because affairs of the art, like you say, it was a long process. It was a long production. All came together in the end, of course, and has been doing very well. I mean, do you feel like in hindsight, like a weight has been lifted and there's kind of an itch to crack on with the next thing, or is there more of a sense of like, all right, I need some time off from this?
Yeah, I did really feel like I need some time off, but we are having time off now, and it's really lovely. We're doing things like this, and when we released the film, it was in lockdown, so we couldn't really go to we couldn't do anything. Nobody could. So we're making the most of everything now and saying yes to everything. So we've got like wall-to-wall things until Christmas, which is nice. We've probably overdone it, but anyway, who cares? So it's just really lovely to be meeting people again and out and about. But I do feel we've got another film idea now, and so we for a period of time, I was saying we're going to make another film, but I didn't really feel committed to it because I just thought it was so difficult to make the last film. It was such a long process that I've just really been enjoying not making a film and just enjoying myself. But now I do feel ready to crack on and make another film, and so. What we're doing, I won't say exactly what it is, but it's very short and much simpler, so that it'll actually be finished in my lifetime, and not a big long film. And try and because the wonderful thing about films is film festivals like LINOLEUM. It's such a privilege to have a film finished and be able to travel with it to film festivals. Even online festivals, they're not the same, but they're better in some ways, because it's more inclusive and you can get more people, and for people who can't normally travel to film festivals. But being able to travel to film festivals with your film and meet other creative people and is such a privilege, and it's so lovely that I thought we just got to make a shorter film so that we can get out there again. Because it's a lovely life, being a filmmaker.
Yeah. I think that taking that, because it's often kind of a romanticized thing as well. The idea of being successful in animation, whether it's series work or films or the type of work you do. And I think it's very important, especially for young people, to hear about this kind of stuff, these sort of like these lows that kind of come packaged with that, because it's great to be aspirational, but I think it's also good to have realistic expectations. And, even someone who is, you're considered, I think, one of the true like sunbeams of animation, if you'll pardon the rather nauseating verbiage. But everyone knows that you're really kind of super positive and super friendly and very supportive of the community and all of that. But you're human as well, and you have your own kind of anxieties. And I think that that's an important thing that should be discussed more. And I'm really glad that it is, and that LINOLEUM and other platforms like this have been really kind of incorporating it more into the discussion. I think that's a really positive thing.
Yeah. No.
I think.
No, sorry, carry on.
Well, I guess also what that kind of feeds into is, again, sort of going back to people who are just sort of starting out, students or people early on in their careers. And the big, I think, difference now compared to sort of when you were starting out is like the inescapable beast that is social media. And that's become this like bar, I guess, to kind of reach for a lot of people. You know, especially, and it's comes with a ton of pressures, and I think it's a lot of inadequacy has kind of like come from that. So I'd be interested to hear if you had any kind of like advice or kind of words of wisdom for people who that's all they've kind of known, I guess, sort of like as they emerged creatively or started that journey.
Well, I think it goes back to what I said right at the beginning, which was I was in a way really, really lucky. And what gave me my confidence was I wasn't comparing myself with other people when I was at college, because I was on my own doing animation and everybody else was doing graphic design. I was just sort of exploring and having fun, which of course, social media, you're so visible, you know, and you see what everybody's doing and everybody's showing everything. It's really hard, you know, to not be competitive or to compare yourself with other people. And you know, social media is one wonderful as a platform to get your work seen. You know, that's great, but probably not great for your mental well-being, in terms of comparing yourself, like looking at teenagers, trying to make themselves look all beautiful and you know, like but for filmmakers it's also the same thing, you know, looking at people's work and saying, how come they've got so many followers and I haven't got that many followers? What do I have to do that? And it's really hard, you know. And if there's any way, I don't know how one deals with it really, but it just sort of goes back to the idea of being a graduate. When you leave college, be true to yourself. You know, you are who you are. You can't be anybody else. You just have to be yourself. And that's your originality and your own stories about that are personal to you. You know, I was in Istanbul recently doing some animation teaching with Les, and it was great. One of the students was saying, but I haven't got a style, and you know, and I was looking at her work, and I said, but that's your style. You draw. It's you. You know, it's you. It was you made that line. That's your style. You don't have to fit into this style. You are doing what you do, and it's lovely. So I suppose it's just trying not to pigeonhole yourself and just try and do what you do, not compare yourself with everybody else, and experiment as much as possible, and maybe just try and put blinkers on, try not to be affected by everybody else and think that they're all doing better than you are, you know.
Yeah. Something that I think was a kind of important lesson to learn in some work I had done not that long ago, and it was very kind of metrics oriented, and it was about getting a lot of content generated for social media. And you really do learn what a crapshoot the whole algorithm thing is. And I think coming away from that, that was like, okay, so in a lot of respects, this is kind of meaningless. Like it's a good thing to have an indication of like a follower base or a fan base, and that's great if it can encourage you. But I think on the other end of that, if people are kind of struggling a bit to generate that kind of interest, I think it's important to not like take it to mean, oh no, does that mean I'm just not good? You know, there needs to be, I think, some kind of catalyst that will sort of like propel you in terms of visibility and that sort of thing. And you know, one of the big ones is, you know, making films and getting them out there. Yeah. Excellent.
I mean, I do think, yeah. Oh, anyway, yes.
Well, I just noted that on that note, we're at the point where our hour is up, but we do have some questions in. So if we'll move on to that stage of the event. So first one, how did you return back to work after the creative menopause? What was the stimulus?
I can't remember, actually. I think it was just, why was it? Maybe it was just my hormones. Maybe everything clicked into place. And yeah, I can't remember. There wasn't a moment. I mean, doing the storyboard. I was working on the storyboard for 100 years, and I did actually go for a lunch with old friend Candy Gard, wonderful filmmaker, and Jane Hubbard, who I mentioned before, who helped with some of the commercials. And we were talking about the storyboard. And it was just a couple of very simple questions that Candy asked. And she just said, but what's it about? You know, because I was saying the story. And I said, well, I suppose it's just about the relationship between two sisters, ultimately. And I think once I had said that, it helped me with the perspective of the film, because we had the storyboard and the script and everything, but it was just, I was trying to see where I fitted in. And then once I realized, actually, the important thing is their relationship. And that really then kickstarted me to focus on, okay, I now understand my own storyboard. And then I had the confidence, I think, to, yeah, I know now, and press on. So maybe it was that.
Cool. Next, this is a two-part question. Is there a way to make a 10-minute animation movie while you have a full-time job in a company? Luckily, the full-time job is also about the art, but is there a way of maybe pushing yourself after main work or taking a long vacation to make the movie?
Yeah, maybe taking a long vacation to make the movie is a more realistic way of approaching it, because I think most of the people I know who have tried to make a film and have the full-time job, it's really hard because you're just exhausted, at the end of the day, especially if you are doing a creative job, so all your creativity is going down one. It's just time, and as we've been talking about, life just gets in the way, so you still got to deal with everything that we've all got to deal with, and those are the things you do after work, not make another film. So maybe the best thing, I suppose, it also depends on how much time the film is going to take, because if it's very simple style, or very, maybe the soundtrack is all in the soundtrack, but the animation is quite simple, then it probably is doable. But my film, Elle and Britannia, I moved away and I locked myself in a room, and so that was a 5-minute film, and I finished it in about 3 months. So you could take 3 months and do 5 minutes. Maybe don't do 10 minutes, just do a minute. Do a short film. Think what you can fit into an advert, and they're only 30 seconds, so it doesn't have to be a long film. It can be short. And film festivals, as you know, Ben, love short films. Like you're more likely to get a 1-minute film shown in a film festival or online than you are a 10-minute film, because people have got short attention spans these days, and programmers love it because they're little.
The reviewers like those too. And as we say, I mean, it's a good way also to kind of test out what your limits might be sort of early on, or what your kind of pacing might be. So it's a good way to start. Cool. Do you consider your work a serious contribution to modern feminism and the reawareness of women in society?
I suppose what I do feel is that I do feel a responsibility as an inspiration to young women who make films, and also men. But I do feel that I do get a lot of feedback from women who are making films, saying, "Oh, I'm doing animation because I've seen your films," and so that to me is just being a woman who makes films is quite empowering, and I'm able to teach, and seeing a woman teaching a classroom, it's just a different perspective. And so I think instead of it being an academic look at feminism, I do think practically I mean, I'm a feminist, of course, but I do think practically I'm a woman and I make films and I teach, and that's important, you know, because it's important to see women doing those things to inspire other younger women and older women like Beryl, discovering stuff later on in life, just to give them the confidence that they can do these things.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Something that you mentioned also about like that initial response you got from the chap on the coach, and how his interpretation wasn't pro-women, it was anti-men. And
Yeah.
what a sort of like template for so much of what we see when people respond to media that, you know, focuses on women or incorporates women in a way that's actually just kind of reflective on life, and people get so aggrieved and so they feel so sort of targeted by it, as though it's some kind of
Mm.
like, you know, wiping out of maleness from entertainment. And
Yes.
has that sort of recurred as a sort of
No, it hasn't.
criticism?
No, not to me. No, it hasn't actually. I have to say, everybody's been very positive, and said very positive things, and haven't felt targeted in any way. I haven't had many angry messages from hurt men. No, but I have had a lot of positive messages from Beryl type women who like to see themselves portrayed on the big screen.
Yeah.
So I
As
think
far
quite
as your
important. Yeah.
as far as your future work is concerned, then do you imagine those similar kind of themes will be part of what you want to tell stories about?
Um, um, I think it comes through naturally. I think, you know, I
Yeah.
just tell, you know, if I make a film, it's inevitably going to end up, uh, the story will be told through my eyes, you know, so the women will be strong women, and but it's, yeah, can't say too much about our next project, but uh, I mean, one of the things that I really want to do is I mean, enjoying the teaching, and you know, you get to a certain age, I think, where you just think you want to tell everybody everything and make sure make sure you use your experience and your your experience to pass on. I mean, luckily, you know, I was able to share some of Richard Williams's pearls of wisdom before he passed away, and spend time with him, because he wanted to do the same. You know, he really wanted to tell me all of his secrets, you know. So you know, we spent ages together talking about animation, and he was telling me all this stuff. And so, yeah, I definitely want to carry on inspiring and teaching animation, inspiring young people.
Oh, well, that's fantastic to hear. And thank you so much for doing this with me. And thanks to LINOLEUM for putting this on.
Yeah,
It's a real treat. And yeah,
yeah,
apologies
amazing.
on my part for occasionally dipping out. But you know, I knew that you were the best person for that kind of thing to happen with, because I've seen you do
You
talks
didn't hear
about
my pretend Ben accent. I pretended to be you. No, I didn't. No, I didn't.
yeah, so yes, thanks again. Thank you to LINOLEUM and Anastasia, all of the LINOLEUM team, everyone who came to this. And yes, thanks again, and have a great day, everyone. And
Yeah, thank
all the best
you.
for the rest of the festival.
And thank you, Ben.